Hello, everybody. Today's lecture is going to be on the rise of big business in America. We've already kind of talked a little bit about this in previous lectures about how the Gilded Age is going to be the time of the haves and the have-nots, and a lot of it's going to do with technology and the growth to allow for bigger business. So I believe we ended up with the last lecture about let's see here, the Transcontinental Railroad, about how railroads are going to link East Coast and the West Coast. We're kind of talking about that a little bit. Impact of the railroads in America, some benefits of that. The fact that the railroads can be created, hence you need steel in order to create railroads. So we'll get to that in a minute. But some advantages of steel and advantages of the railroad is that you're going to have the growth of other industries. So again, the steel industry is going to be booming because you need railroads. You need steel to make railroads. You need iron. You need coal, lumber, glass. So all those things you need in order to run a railroad. So it's going to grow those other industries, the coal and the lumber and gas. It's going to help cities grow. So it's going to link cities up. So people are going to, work on the railroads, and people are going to settle down in those big cities where the factories are at, hence where the coal mines are going to be at, where other factories are going to be at, where steel mines are going to be at. That's going to allow cities to start to expand. If you look at Cleveland, for instance, Cleveland back in the late 18 or early 1900s was a steel town along with Pittsburgh. So very, very big in terms of that. It's going to help increase westward expansion. So obviously the roads are going to start on the East Coast and they're going to end on the West Coast. So that's going to allow people to start moving from east to west, start spreading out our population. Standard time zones were created to get everyone on correct time, which, okay, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, kind of self-explanatory. Now, the one thing that's going to lead to with the railroad industry is corruption. This is really the first big business. They're going to charge much higher rates to Western farmers because that's a longer distance to travel for some Eastern companies. They're going to charge them higher rates for the farmers. So there's going to be some disputes between the farmers and some of these railroad companies where farmers are going to feel like they're being basically picked on and charged unfair wages where they can't compete with the Eastern farmers. The Credit Mobiler scandal. This is the Union Pacific. This is a fake construction company. They're going to bribe members of Congress, and essentially, with bribing members of Congress through this fake business, it's going to pad the pockets of a lot of people. So again, showing the corruption of the times and how some of these big businesses are kind of out of control. So one of the we'll talk more about him in a minute, but one of the big moguls of the time was Cornelius Vanderbilt. He was heavily involved in the railroad industry. He became like the first railroad tycoon. He got started in the steamboat operations actually, and then eventually he saw. So kind of going back to that risk-taking businessman, robber barons, and that kind of thing. He took a risk. He got out of the steamboat ship business, which was very successful, but he saw railroads as the future, and he got out of the steamboat ship business, and he developed more into the railroad. Getting big risk, but that's what a lot of these entrepreneurs are going to do. Is they're risk takers. All right. So what allowed the steel industry's impact on America? That's going to be starting with the Bessemer process. The Bessemer process made industrialization possible because the Bessemer process is going to be a way. It's an invention that's going to mass produce steel quickly and at a cheap rate. So without you couldn't make railroads, you couldn't build cities if you didn't have this invention. So really a game changer. And steel is going to be used on railroads and farm equipment, canned goods. Engineers are going to use steel to create skyscrapers in cities, start building up instead of building out. So steel is going to be a vital invention that's going to allow for the railroad industry to boom and several construction, etc. So Andrew Carnegie and Johnny Rockefeller became like the tycoons in these industries. So Carnegie will get involved in the steel business. He'll settle in Pittsburgh, hence Pittsburgh Steelers, Carnegie Steel, Pittsburgh. So he's an industrialist who made a fortune in steel, and he gave $350 million away to charity, libraries, hospitals, schools, that kind of thing. So he's very generous in terms of giving a lot of his fortunes away. And then John D. Rockefeller actually had Cleveland roots, but he was involved in the oil industry. So yeah, Vanderbilt, railroads, Carnegie, steel, Rockefeller, oil. Those were the big three, and these three men are going to be the most powerful individuals in the United States in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And John D. Rockefeller will have basically the first monopoly in U.S. Standard Oil. As you see this picture here, you see Standard Oil basically with the octopus putting its um, things all over the earth, basically taking full control. So oil was a huge, huge, huge thing. They controlled everything. Then you have J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan was an industrialist who started U.S. Steel from Carnegie Steel and other companies. He became the first billionaire, and he bailed out the U.S. economy on more than one occasion. So several times when the U.S. economy was in the tubes and he bailed out, he bailed them out. He was, again, a billionaire, involved in banking, involved in other ventures like steel. He eventually will buy out Andrew Carnegie, and he'll buy into the steel industry later on. All right, so here's the rise of big business. So one thing to understand: so Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, some different tactics that they're going to use to gain control of the market. So there's two things: vertical integration and horizontal integration. So vertical integration is a process when a company buys out all of its suppliers. So example would be coal and iron mines, or freighters, railroad lines. So you see this picture here. It's kind of hard to see. Let me actually present this. It would be easier for you guys to see this. Yeah, perfect. There we go. So you see, this is when somebody is going to control every aspect of what they're going to need in order to corner the market. So as you see, if you own a slaughterhouse and you had a meat plant thing, you would buy your own wagon industry, meat packing plants, you buy your own cooled warehouses, refrigerated railroad cars, your own slaughterhouse. You'd own every aspect that you would need in order to. So you'd buy. Oh, let me get off this. Shoot, sorry. There we go. You'd have your cattle. You would obviously buy and own cattle. You would buy slaughterhouses to kill the cattle. You'd buy your own railroad cars to transport the cattle and the meat into the railroad cars. Then you need cool warehouses to where you keep the meat cool. Then you buy your meat packing plants where you're actually going to package the meat. Then your delivery wagons, you're going to deliver the wagons to stores, etc. So that's vertical integration. That's what vertical integration means. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you own the whole process. You're not charging somebody else or hiring somebody else to do that part for you. You're buying your own stuff. So a lot of entrepreneurs are going to use this technique to save money. They're going to buy every aspect of the thing to complete their business. Or you could use horizontal integration. This is a process in which a company buys out or merges with all competing companies. So, for example, that would be J.P. Morgan bought out Carnegie Steel and other companies. So let's say this company was Myers oil refinery. This one was Radigan oil refinery. This one was Flipiak oil refinery. This one was Miss Aikens oil refinery. All these companies, like I just said, me, Miss Aikens, Mr. Flip, Mr. Radigan, were all bought out by the big company. So horizontal means this big company is buying out all the smaller companies and merging together to form one big company. So that's what Carnegie, that's what all these Rockefeller are going to use this tactic to eliminate the competition. We'll get to that here in a little bit. So rise of big business, you start seeing these trusts start to develop. A trust is a group of separate companies placed under the control of a single managing board. So that's kind of what I was going back earlier. So again, all these independent companies are bought up by the single entity here, and they're going to control everything. This is similar to a monopoly. So what is a monopoly? Think of like the board game, the board game Monopoly. The whole point of the game is to buy up everything you can, to have monopoly, to eliminate all competition. So when you eliminate all competition, what can you do to the price of the good? So think about Burger King, McDonald's, Taco Bell. Why aren't fast food companies, why aren't they charging $10, $15 for a fast food meal? Well, because there's Wendy's, there's Arby's, there's McDonald's, there's Burger King, there's Sonic. They have competition, right? So they have to keep their wages, they have to keep what they're selling the product for at a minimum because of competition. But let's say McDonald's, if they bought out all those companies that I just mentioned, what can McDonald's do to the price? Well, there's no more competition left. They could jack up the prices. So when that happens, that's a monopoly when you eliminate all competition. So critics call these practices unfair. So many people say that this is not good for the consumer. It eliminates competition. That these businesses use unfair tactics. So therefore, they label them as robber barons. If they rob the consumer, they rob the poor. This is not fair. So business owners, Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller were brilliant businessmen and innovators. Both took great risks to amass their fortunes. However, some claim they did so through shady and unethical practices, as we'll talk about here in a minute. So again, a robber baron. There's no right or wrong answer for this. Many historians still argue: are they robber barons or are they captains of industry? And some people say they're either or. But robber baron is somebody who made their money through shady or unethical business tactics. Maybe they didn't break a law, but they used some questionable things. They could have done more. They were unethical in how they handled their business practices. Some people say, hey, they didn't break any laws. They're brilliant. They use their smarts. They use their work ethic to have an advantage. So kudos to them. All's love and fair in war. So it's kind of like that kind of concept. So that's a captain of industry. So again, here's a little chart here. So robber barons, here's some arguments here. They did not pay their workers much. As you'll learn about here in the next unit or the next part, lecture speech, workers made little to nothing. They made zilch. Wages were awful. So while all these Carnegie, Rockefeller, while they're amassing hundreds of millions of dollars, the workers are not even scraping by. So keep that in mind as we move forward in the unit. You'll kind of see that. They drove their competition out of business using horizontal integration. They bought out the competition so that they can raise up prices when they have their monopoly. They made secret deals with their suppliers. So, for instance, if I own my own railroad company and say if you own your own railroad company, I'm getting secret deals. I'm getting discounts. So, in order for example, if we're both in the hay business, I'm getting 15 cents off each barrel of hay, and you're not. That's an advantage to me. I'm saving 15 cents per barrel of hay. Now that might seem small, but eventually it adds up, and it's huge discounts for me. So I was getting that, but you weren't. So that's what it was allowing me to move ahead of you and more profits to amass my fortunes. I was getting discounts off things where you weren't. They lied. They manipulated people. So those were all things that they did. So why people claim they're robber barons? Captain of industry. Here's some arguments for that. They hired smart businessmen to do jobs. They invested in technology. They hired the best people. So they use smart practices by hiring brilliant individuals to run things for them and to invent things. They gave lots of money to charities. You saw Carnegie gave $350 million to charity. Rockefeller $500 million. So they gave a lot of money to help people. Lying isn't breaking the law. They were self-made men. Some of these men came from nothing. They built themselves into something. They took risks. Those are all examples, and we'll show you more of these things in class. Examples of all these things kind of in action, so you can kind of make your own decision. Now, here's kind of showcasing you guys to some different examples of what companies do in terms of horizontal integration. So Coca-Cola, look at their product. They own Dasani, they own Fanta, they own Powerade. So all those products are all under Coca-Cola label. PepsiCo is all Quaker Oats. Taco Bell, KFC, Pepsi is all the PepsiCo company. Lay's, so they're in chips. You got your drinks, you got your snacks and cereal, you got your fast food. So PepsiCo's, look how big their umbrella is. Kellogg, look at their list of things. Nestle, look at theirs. So those are all examples like horizontal integration where they have their hands in a lot of different things. Same for here. You got Viacom, you got Disney. Look at all things that they own. That their umbrella. You can even argue this is monopoly. Can I go ahead and read that about Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller Company. This is the first monopoly. Again, when they controlled the whole oil industry, 90% of oil in the United States was controlled by Standard Oil. There will be another lecture on this, so you'll see part 2.